It happened in less than 3 minutes, 7 words that echoed through the walls of Westminster and sent shockwaves across the entire United Kingdom. Nigel Farage stood in Parliament calm and steady as the man who once prided himself on control, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, completely fell apart. What unfolded next wasn't just political drama, it was the public unravelling of a nation's leader. Cameras captured every second, microphones caught every breath, and by the end of the day, the headlines weren't about policy or debate. They were about humiliation, collapse, and the beginning of the end for Keir Starmer. Because what Farage said and how Starmer reacted changed British politics forever. Wednesday, 12:10 p.m. Prime Minister's questions. The chamber was packed, the air thick with tension. Journalists lined the press gallery, MPs murmured across the benches, and yet there was something different in the atmosphere, as if everyone sensed something big was about to happen. Farage, now sitting as the face of Reform UK, waited patiently for his turn. The Speaker called his name, and instantly the noise faded into silence. All eyes turned to him. Farage didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his tone measured but heavy with intent. Then came the 7 words that would ignite the firestorm. You have betrayed every promise you made. The effect was immediate. Starmer's face stiffened. His expression twisted as if the words had hit him like a physical blow. MPs shifted in their seats, knowing this wasn't a typical political jab, but this was personal. Farage didn't stop there. He followed with precision, each sentence landing harder than the last. You vowed to take back control, he said. You vowed to secure the borders, to stand for British workers, to protect our sovereignty. And yet the numbers show 45,000 illegal crossings this year alone. Millions in taxpayer money wasted on hotels, secret talks with Brussels about rejoining EU migration programmes. Tell me, Prime Minister, was all of this incompetence or deception? The chamber fell into a stunned silence as Starmer, visibly rattled, tried to steady himself, but Farage had already framed the battlefield. The Reform UK leader spoke like a man dissecting a case, factual, ruthless and unstoppable. You've turned promises into excuses, he continued. The British people voted for leadership, not surrender. They wanted borders, not back doors. And now they're watching a government that talks tough but folds when it matters. The Speaker called for order, but it was too late. The scene had changed. Starmer's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the dispatch box and a wave of fury crossed his face. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of rage. He could have responded with calm authority. He could have countered with facts, but instead something inside him snapped. How dare you question my integrity? He thundered, his voice echoing across the chamber. The benches erupted, gasps, whispers, chaos. This was not the polished, disciplined Starmer the public had grown used to. This was a man on the verge of losing control. Farage didn't flinch. He simply stood there, unblinking, while the Prime Minister's voice grew louder, more desperate. You don't speak for Britain, Starmer shouted. You speak for hate, for division, for everything this country rejected. His words shook with emotion, but the damage was done. It didn't sound like leadership. It sounded like panic. MPs on both sides looked stunned. Even his own party members glanced away, unsure of how to react. The Speaker tried to restore order. Prime Minister, please resume your seat. But Starmer ignored him, his voice cutting through the chaos. No, he snapped, I won't sit down while this man poisons this chamber with lies. At that moment, the room crossed a line no one thought possible. For the first time in modern history, the Speaker of the House had to issue a command not heard in generations. Standing Order 43, he declared firmly, the Prime Minister is directed to withdraw from the chamber. Gasps filled the room. Some MPs thought they had misheard. Others sat frozen in disbelief. You can't do this, Starmer shouted, his face red with anger. I am the Prime Minister. But the Speaker's voice didn't waver. And I am maintaining the dignity of this House. Security escort the Prime Minister from the chamber. Cameras zoomed in as 2 security officers approached. Starmer stepped back, visibly trembling. The power in his voice was gone. His colleagues stayed silent. Not one moved to intervene. The moment felt surreal. The most powerful man in the country, surrounded by flashing cameras, being led out of Parliament like an unruly guest. "This is outrageous," he muttered, but the words fell flat. The nation was already watching history being made live. And then, as the door closed behind him, Farage's voice echoed once more, calm, precise, devastating. "This," he said, "is what happens when leaders forget who they serve." In that instant, the damage was irreversible. Within seconds, clips began circulating on social media. Within minutes, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Starmer ejected. Hashtag Farage showdown. Hashtag Parliament chaos. By the end of the hour, the footage had gone viral worldwide. Commentators called it the most shocking moment in parliamentary history. Opposition parties were in disbelief. Foreign outlets were already describing it as the day British politics broke. And yet, behind the scenes, things were about to get even worse for Keir Starmer. Because what started as a moment of anger was quickly transforming into a full-blown political crisis. The Prime Minister's silence, his party's confusion, and the public's outrage, all of it began merging into something unstoppable. Farage hadn't just landed a blow, he had triggered a chain reaction that would shake the very foundation of British politics. By the following morning, the chaos that began in Parliament had evolved into a full-scale national scandal. Every front page carried the same image. Keir Starmer being escorted from the chamber, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. The headlines were brutal. Prime Minister thrown out. Starmer loses control. Farage exposes government meltdown. What had begun as a fiery exchange in the Commons now looked like the collapse of an entire government. Political analysts called it the most humiliating moment for a sitting Prime Minister in modern history. News anchors replayed the footage on loop, dissecting every gesture, every word, every flicker of emotion. The verdict was unanimous. Starmer had lost control, and worse, he had done it live before millions. Inside Downing Street, the atmosphere was suffocating. Ministers avoided eye contact in the corridors. Aides whispered behind closed doors, crafting statements, drafting apologies, trying to contain a fire that refused to die. But containment was impossible. The images were everywhere. Social media became a battlefield. Clips of Farage's calm delivery versus Starmer's eruptions spread like wildfire. Memes mocked the Prime Minister's outburst while Reform UK's online presence surged. Farage's 7 words had become a national mantra. "You have betrayed every promise you made." They were printed on shirts, quoted in tweets, and shouted at protests. It was no longer a political critique. It was a symbol of everything voters felt but couldn't articulate: frustration, betrayal, exhaustion. Across the country, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Radio shows filled with angry callers demanding answers. "If he can't control himself, how can he control the country?" one man said. In pubs, workplaces and online forums, the conversation was the same. Britain had witnessed the mask fall off its leader. Even Labour loyalists struggled to defend what they'd seen. "It was a bad day," one cabinet minister muttered during a BBC interview, but the public wasn't buying it. The footage told a story that no press statement could rewrite. Meanwhile, Farage seized the moment with surgical precision. That same evening, he addressed the press from outside Parliament. The backdrop was simple: the Union Jack fluttering behind him, the weight of history on his side. "This is not about personality," he said calmly. "It's about trust. The British people deserve leadership that listens, not lectures." Today they saw the truth: a government that cannot answer simple questions without collapsing into outrage. His words resonated far beyond the Westminster bubble. Within hours, his speech had millions of views online, trending across Europe and America. For the first time, political commentators openly asked if Nigel Farage was no longer just a protest politician, but a genuine contender for power. Inside Labour HQ, panic turned to chaos. Emergency meetings were called. Advisers debated how to handle the crisis: apologise, attack, or stay silent. But Starmer's silence only made things worse. For 48 hours, he vanished from public view. No interviews, no statements, no reassurance. In that vacuum, the narrative hardened. Farage had humiliated him, and the Prime Minister was too shaken to face the country. Rumours swirled about internal rebellion. Whispers that senior ministers were questioning his judgment. that letters of no confidence were being drafted. The same MPs who had once praised his composure now privately called him unfit and unstable. Polls confirmed their fears. Overnight, Labour's approval rating plummeted by 12 points. Reform UK soared to 22%, nearly overtaking Labour in key constituencies. In northern towns once considered Labour's heartland, local polls showed a shocking swing toward Farage's party. Focus groups described Starmer as weak, arrogant and out of touch. Even mainstream newspapers that had backed Labour began to distance themselves. The Times ran an editorial titled "Leadership in Crisis," while The Guardian called the incident a moment that redefines political accountability. Farage, sensing the shift, launched a nationwide tour within days. At each stop, he replayed the viral clip on giant screens before delivering his message. This is what happens when politicians forget who they serve. Crowds erupted in applause. He didn't need to shout. The footage did the shouting for him. Every event drew larger audiences than the last. Donations poured in. Reform UK's membership tripled in a week. What had begun as a single parliamentary confrontation had transformed into a populist movement. Meanwhile, back in Downing Street, Keir Starmer's team tried to craft a comeback strategy. Advisors urged him to appear on television, to apologise, to humanise himself. Show emotion, one aide suggested. People need to see regret, not rage. But Starmer refused. "I won't apologise for standing up to Farage," he said coldly. That defiance might have sounded strong behind closed doors, but to the public, it came across as denial. When he finally emerged 3 days later for a press conference, the damage was already done. Cameras clicked as he stepped to the podium, visibly tense. "What happened in Parliament," he began, "was regrettable, but it's time to move forward." The journalist didn't let him. Question after question hit him like a barrage. "Did you lose control, Prime Minister? Did the Speaker overstep his authority? Are you planning to resign?" His answers were clipped, defensive, emotionless. The broadcast only deepened the perception that he was out of touch with reality. As the press conference ended, the cameras caught a moment no one missed. Starmer walking away alone, shoulders slumped, while aides whispered urgently behind him. The once commanding figure now looked diminished, weighed down by the gravity of his own mistake. Outside, protesters gathered, chanting Farage's words like a battle cry. For the first time since taking office, the question wasn't whether Starmer could win the next election. It was whether he could survive the week. By the end of the week, the tremors from Starmer's parliamentary collapse had turned into a political earthquake, shaking the entire United Kingdom. Parliament itself seemed to be holding its breath. Corridors, once filled with the buzz of routine, now echoed with whispers of resignation, rebellion, and the possible end of a premiership. Senior Labour figures moved quietly between meetings, trying to calculate whether Starmer's leadership could still be saved, or if clinging to him would drag the entire party down with him. The reality was grim. Their Prime Minister had become a liability, and the public mood had shifted from disappointment to outright anger. Across the country, rallies erupted. In Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds and Newcastle, crowds gathered waving British flags and Reform UK banners. The phrase, "You have betrayed every promise you made," became the unifying slogan of a frustrated nation. Protesters shouted it outside Labour offices, scrawled it on placards and plastered it across social media. Videos of Farage's speech played on loop in public squares. For many Britons, this wasn't just about a single outburst in Parliament. It had become a symbol of everything wrong with modern politics. Leaders out of touch, promises broken, and ordinary people ignored. Farage's calm demeanour and measured tone, in contrast to Starmer's fury, were burned into the national consciousness. He looked like order. Starmer looked like chaos. Internationally, the fallout was swift. Foreign news outlets treated the event as a constitutional crisis. "Britain in turmoil," read the headline on CNN. "Prime Minister ejected live," reported Le Monde. Even Commonwealth partners like Australia and Canada expressed concerns about the stability of British leadership. Economists warned that the uncertainty was beginning to ripple into markets. The pound dipped, investor confidence wavered, and the opposition, sensing weakness, sharpened their knives. The Conservatives demanded Starmer issue a full apology to Parliament or face a motion of censure. Behind the scenes, they quietly prepared for the possibility of an early election, believing that Labour's implosion could open the door for their own resurgence. In the middle of this storm, Starmer attempted to regain control. He scheduled a televised address to the nation, an opportunity to show composure and leadership. The broadcast began with him seated at his desk in Downing Street, the Union Jack behind him, his voice carefully steady. "I regret the tone of my response in the House of Commons," he said, "but I will not apologise for defending our values against divisive rhetoric." The words sounded rehearsed, drained of emotion, and entirely disconnected from the public mood. Within minutes, commentators labelled it too little, too late. Social media exploded with clips comparing Starmer's calm statement to the raw footage of his eruption. One side composed, the other explosive, and no one believed the former erased the memory of the latter. Inside Labour ranks, the backlash intensified. Angela Rayner was reported to have told colleagues, "He's finished. It's just a matter of when." Cabinet ministers privately discussed contingency plans for a leadership contest. Yvette Cooper and Wes Streeting began receiving quiet calls of support from MPs exploring alternatives. Whips struggled to maintain discipline as more letters of no confidence were submitted to the party's executive committee. The dam was cracking, and no amount of loyalty speeches could stop the water from rushing in. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage capitalised on every moment. He appeared on major talk shows, his confidence unshaken. "This isn't about gloating," he said during a Sky News interview. "This is about accountability." The people are tired of being lied to. What they saw in Parliament was the real Keir Starmer, a man who can't handle the truth. Each appearance boosted his image further. Donations to Reform UK skyrocketed, campaign volunteers tripled, and party offices in regional cities were overwhelmed with new members. Political strategists began whispering what had once seemed unthinkable. Farage could soon be leading not just a movement, but the nation's second largest political force. Back in Whitehall, panic gave way to paralysis. Civil servants privately admitted that Starmer's authority was evaporating. Policy proposals stalled. International partners hesitated to engage with his government. Even routine cabinet meetings became strained, filled with awkward silences and veiled glances. The Prime Minister, once viewed as methodical and disciplined, now appeared cornered and defensive. Every decision he made was second-guessed, every word analysed for weakness. And through it all, Farage's phrase, "You have betrayed every promise you made," lingered like a curse over Downing Street. The public reaction was unlike anything Britain had seen in decades. Street interviews captured the national mood, a blend of anger, disbelief, and dark amusement. "He lost it," one man told a reporter. "If the Speaker has to throw the Prime Minister out, that tells you everything." Others were more sympathetic, but equally worried. "It's sad," a woman in Nottingham said. "I voted for him because I thought he was steady. But if he can't stay calm in Parliament, how's he going to stay calm in a crisis?" Pollsters recorded historic lows for public trust in the political system itself. Barely 1 in 4 Britons believed the government was stable enough to lead. Then came the breaking point. 2 senior ministers, the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary, resigned within hours of each other, citing a loss of confidence in leadership. Their letters, quickly leaked to the press, painted a devastating picture. A Prime Minister isolated, volatile and incapable of uniting his party or the country. News outlets called it the final collapse of discipline. Overnight, bookmakers slashed the odds on Starmer stepping down before the year's end. Opposition parties demanded a general election. Even Buckingham Palace reportedly sought clarification from Downing Street about whether the government still commanded the confidence of Parliament. For Keir Starmer, the humiliation was complete. The same man who once campaigned on restoring dignity and stability to British politics had become the embodiment of disorder. The footage of his removal from Parliament continued to haunt him. Every late-night show replayed it, every political ad used it, every news intro began with that single defining moment, and at the centre of it all stood Nigel Farage, calm, composed and victorious, the man whose 7 words had turned a government upside down. Yet as powerful as that image was, it was only the beginning of what was coming next. Because Britain wasn't just watching a man lose his temper, it was witnessing a political order collapsing in real time.